Dave Morris's evidence. It's day 10 of tranche 2, phase 2 of the Undercover Policing Inquiry. Dave Morris was given his second half of his evidence during this phase. He gave the first of it on Tuesday, but had to finish early. I'm joined with Simon Israel, who's a slightly more famous person to be sort of talking to in these breaks rather than everybody else. Simon, what do you think of Dave's evidence?
What amazes me about Dave Morris is the sheer enormous amounts of knowledge that he has. I mean, a lot of it he seems to carry around in a bag too. But his ability to know the details of meeting agendas and who said what, where, and the behaviour of, in particular, of those two undercover officers that had infiltrated the organisation that he was part of, Bob Lambert and John Dines, and how he was able to recall and remember the details of what in effect is now, what, if you're going to the 80s and the 90s, so that's 30 years ago, isn't it, or more?
Yeah.
And he was an impressive witness and came across as sincere and honest. If he didn't remember something, he would say, I can't. If something was not correct, he would correct it. But he is especially damning of the whole undercover setup that permeated almost everything that he did, really, in one way or another. So I was impressed, and there is an awful lot. I know that a lot has been written about the McLibel case, about his role, about Helen Steele's role, and that has been gone over and over again. But you still find some of the stuff absolutely astonishing when you hear it again. I mean, really quite astonishing. And this deceiving collaboration between the Met and McDonald's corporation, and you start to begin to understand from looking at the reports that the likes of Bob Lambert and Dines wrote, and you said, is that really how it was? Not, are you even factually right in saying there will only be this number of demonstrators here, or this is the person who's running the whole show, and turns out it's not quite like that at all. And then, and to be fair, Dave Morris tried to paint the idea of, look, these individual SDS officers had a narrow focus on what they perceived as the main players, but actually, and thereby missed the whole big picture. Certainly when it came to the anti-poll tax movement, about the thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people involved, and all they focused on were 2 or 3, 4, a handful, basically, as if they were the masters of the universe, when in that particular instance they clearly weren't.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I thought Dave did really well at, unlike other previous witnesses, where he introduced some of his own evidence. He took the person who was questioning him to particular documents that he wanted to refer to. He made sure that there was nothing that he wanted to say that he didn't take opportunity to do so. I mean, it's because he's had so much experience in litigation that he's able to do that. And I think he really shows a blueprint for how, when people are called to give evidence, that if there's things they want introduced into the evidence, they can do it. They can direct what is happening during their questioning. Which, for me, I think is a really it's a really useful thing that's happened, because it means that stuff that maybe the inquiry didn't quite understand the significance of gets highlighted properly, and I think Dave did that particularly well. Particularly when we were talking about the way that these undercover officers just didn't get it. The anti-poll tax movement was a movement of millions of people, literally. I mean, the non-payment, even beyond any of the sort of manifestations on the street, the non-payment was just so broad-based and huge, and brought down the government, brought down the Prime Ministership of Thatcher anyway. Helped to. There's lots of other things as well, but it's a very significant one.
It wasn't just the only mistake she made at that time either.
No, quite. Yeah. I mean, I think that it's that way in which these it just shows the deeper problem with these undercover officers is, regardless of any sort of like, they were doing the wrong thing in the wrong place or whatever else, they just didn't get it about what mass movements are and how they operated.
I also think the inquiry is really trying to get into the mindset of and the culture behind all of this SDS stuff, which is really difficult because, and these reports are a sort of glimpse into that world through Bob Lambert and John Nice in particular today, but through many others. And to understand what was it you were doing about this, and that whole perception of we're up against, in effect, these sort of subversive masterminds, criminal masterminds, when they were anything but that. But they had, this is your role, this is your duty, this is what you've got to do. And of course, the suspicion is that to keep going, to keep getting the funds to help fund this secret department of the Metropolitan Police, they had to justify it. So the more you wrote, the more you said, the more it looked like you were feeding back, even though so much of this is just confection and pretty meaningless in one way or another. Okay, so someone's having a baby, and that is what exactly? Okay, I just find this the whole thing. It had a momentum of its own that no one could stop. Okay, and when you're looking back at it, and to be fair, looking back, you can then stand outside and go, hey, look at what we did. And then you go, well, what exactly did you do? And I suspect later on we will hear this attempt by these individual officers to justify. And that will be interesting when you're looking back and going, really? So what difference did you make in the end? I'm struggling to understand. I suspect they will, they may well talk about, well, we made these arrests and we stopped this and we did this, that and the other. And you go, it's not really, major crime fighting, is it? And these enormous amounts of resources and effort, and, some of these people who are spied on are quite obviously still extremely injured by it. I think I've underestimated just how deeply hurt some of the targets still are. And we're going, and we are talking about several decades later, but it doesn't go away. And I'm trying to figure out in the end what this inquiry in the end will achieve, because the rules have been rewritten and lessons have been flagged up. I don't know whether they've been learnt or not. And I think that the chair is trying to focus on whether he can make a difference, maybe in individual miscarriages of justice. But I think his issue is, how do I make this long, tortuous inquiry that after almost 10 years now will be, I'll produce something that makes a difference. Otherwise, have we all been wasting our time and money? And that I find interesting, but how this inquiry thinks it's going to make a difference.
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult, isn't it? Because, I mean, so much has changed since it started. We've got different chairs. When we started, there are very few people involved who were here from the beginning. But like you say, I mean, the hurt that people feel about what happened is still very, very real. It's very, even though it's decades ago, it's very fresh because a lot of these events changed the course of their lives in very significant ways. Relationships destroyed. Whole futures disappearing in front of people that they'd planned out for themselves, which, because of the influence of undercover officers, just got took away. I mean, just you mentioned there about the report about Dave Morris having a child. I mean, it was more than just that was having a child. It was that he'd had a child and that he didn't like the fact that he had to do parenting, and he'd rather be doing activism. But the mother of the child was forcing him to do parenting, which, I mean, it just. If you know anything about Dave Morris, he's a very devoted father. And in fact, in the case, he was co-parenting his child Charlie at the time, and by the time Charlie was 2, he became solo parent for the rest of Charlie's life. I mean, it's we see a lot of these in all the evidence, lots of these little snide comments and reports, just like having a go, just trying to undermine the character of these people, of people who are trying to do good things and just trying to make out that they're being motivated by something distasteful, or that they're just bad people at the heart of it. Which, I mean, it's like a justification that the undercover cops are making for themselves for why it's okay to behave so badly towards people. Is because, well, they're bad people, really.
Maybe they were attracted as they were part of an intelligence gathering unit. They were attracted by the idea these aren't evidential reports that will get produced in court. I've got more freedom to express. I can use more adjectives. I can throw in a little bit of subjectivity. And suddenly the whole thing skews in a way that you go, hang on, wait a minute. And you only learn about that because the likes of Dave Morris and lots of others finally come to give in and say, well, as I remember it, it wasn't like that at all. No, and you're right. You pick up the co-parenting thing. I'm astonished how Dave Morris managed to follow so deeply involved with the McLibel case and raise a child at the same time. Most people wouldn't be able to cope with that at all. And I know there was some support, and we didn't hear all of it today. I think if he'd had the opportunity, we would have been here for at least the rest of the day as he listed everybody who had got engaged in supporting him. But maybe that's for another time. But that whole idea, and I have also been involved in being a dad too, so I know how onerous child rearing is. And you just go, God. And at the same time, your mind has to focus on, so what are we going to do about defending ourselves? How are we going to how am I going to sort this out? How am I going to work through this? And all the colossal number of documents and stuff we have to plough through, all that stuff. And at the same time, trying to raise a young boy. And I think, I'm hoping that, they come away thinking, at least I've set down what I believe is the true picture, rather than from some secret report that had only come to light in recent months, years, of someone else's opinion that then affected my life and the way I was confronted and treated and so on. So, but, whether that's, what the chair does with all that, I don't know. How Mr. Mitting makes this right for all those who've taken the time and the trouble to come here to give evidence, I really don't know. That is quite a task. I can see how he might be able to fix some of the miscarriages of justice, as he has said at the inquiry, and expressed, I think yesterday with Chris Bailey at the very end, who is not a very well man, and really not a very well man, but just said, look, if I can speed up anything at all, I will do so. If I can help in your potential miscarriages of justice, I will do all I can to do that. And you're going, well, it might make a difference if if Chris is alive when that might happen. But yeah, beyond those individual elements, I'm still not clear where this will get to in the end.
I think the one thing that this does...
That's not important anymore.
I mean, I think one of the functions that this inquiry does do is it reveals a layer of social history which is often ignored.
Yes.
Particularly, I mean, I was really taken with what Dave Morris was saying about the lead up to the second national demonstration of the poll tax. Yeah. You know, the huge tension around that, the negotiations with the police. I mean, the way in which how dramatically, like John Major, like scrapping the poll tax 2 days before that demonstration. You know, these stories which are often forgotten because of the way in which, you know, the media works and history is written. And I think that what this inquiry has been really good at is shining a light on a lot of those stories.
Yes.
Which, I mean, people like myself...
For us, you and I, who lived through it, we can go, oh, God, yes, I remember, oh, yes. But for the generations coming, you know, and the whole anti-poll tax movement was, and Dave Morris was quite right, was utterly critical, phenomenal in the history of this country, really, in the history of Britain. I don't think, I mean, you know, you'd have to start going back to Toll Puddle Martyrs and those sorts of things where you got this incredible mass movement, almost instant, not quite maybe, but, and you organised it in a way where, as a mass movement, you forced the government to back down. You know, we haven't seen one of them for a long time. I mean, the Iraq War, maybe, but it didn't force much change, and I accept that. I mean, but this is about changing the challenging laws directly. Now, you know, it all gets bounded up in lawyer stuff, and there isn't that perception there. We can get an immediate resolution here, faster, quicker, and not wait 5 years while this travels through the courts, and while a new government comes in. While, you know, we might wait for legislation, you know, in 2 years' time, 3 years' time, or maybe not. You know, this was fast and furious. Or as there was one document today describing a march where there was actually a category that stated mood, stop, vociferous. And I'm going, what on earth does that matter in a police report? Mood, vociferous. You just go, how ridiculous is that?
It's bad grammar as well. I mean, how's that a mood? You know?
Oh no, I don't know. But then that's how it worked then, I suppose.
I mean, it's like you say, you know, because these documents were never going to be produced in court, they developed their own internal language. I mean, we've seen it in other reports. You know, they saw lots of in-jokes. I mean, something that Bob Lambert started doing was introducing like song lyrics into his reports. You know, there's a lack of seriousness really to the way in which they put these things together. And we saw bits of that today again.
Yeah. It was the ancient equivalent of WhatsApp today, really, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and yeah, with all the things that are associated with that. Yeah. I think you know, Dave Morris continues to be a fascinating witness at the inquiry. I'm sure he's back again. I'm sure in further phases. Are you following the rest of this set of hearings? Are you going to be back?
I'm interested in tranche 2 because it deals with issues that I have reported on in the past, and I think can link to everybody outside. I mean, part of the problem with this inquiry is how it translates to the public and the lack of interest fundamentally that this inquiry is suffering, and it knows that. It can't do anything about it because it's buffered by the evidence and the terms of reference. But out there, there's hardly any interest. I think you need more human interest in it, and this particular tranche of the inquiry, these particular sessions, will suddenly emanate much more about human life than maybe we've seen so far.
I mean, hopefully. I mean, one of the reasons I think that there's a lack of interest in the inquiry is partially because civil liberties are objectively worse now. I mean, as bad as things were in the things that are being reported about. I mean, nowadays you can get 4 years for being part of a meeting. You know, I mean, like what is the current situation for under this current, you know, the current time in 2024 is worse. So no wonder people aren't that, and there's not that much interest in that. So, you know, the fact that they're not interested in stuff in the past is hardly surprising. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, but there's also the tactics have changed. Everything's gone digital and online, and there's much more, in inverted commas, probably to me anyway, potential for true subversion, not this manufactured by Special Branch and the Met type that we hear about now. But I think that, and that is the future. So therefore, the idea that everything is public isn't true. Governments, corporations, very, very wealthy people, very, very powerful people respond to stuff online instantly in one way or another. I mean, really instantly. And that has changed. So your mass movement has become minimalized, if you like, into you can set something going simply by a tweet, an Instagram, a photo, a WhatsApp comment, or whatever, and you can generate. I mean, I don't know how long it took Dave Morris, because he kept saying about how the McLibel thing went global, right? In fact, I think he said at one point there was one leaflet that has been a campaign leaflet that no one has ever published as much across the world as one of the McLibel fact sheets. Now you could do that from your loft in some island in the Hebrides, and whoosh, achieve the same effect, but in, you know, within 24 hours. So that's the difference. But the problem with that is that I don't think as many people see it or respond to it in the same way. The idea you're not on the street, so you know, and so I think there's a whole different strategy. Well, strategy is not the right word. There's a whole different emphasis today than there was then, and your classic protesting foot soldier, if you like, is a lot less of value if you can achieve the same thing quicker, faster, and with a lot less collaboration. I mean, I don't know how you would arrange, if you were trying to arrange an anti-poll tax movement and demonstration on the sizes that happened in the 90s. I don't know how you would do that today. I mean, it's quite interesting. You know, there clearly was, they had set up, because Dave Morris explained today how they had this amazing communication network, and this presumably was without mostly, I don't know, mobiles, 1990? No.
Not the people who are doing it. I mean, I think the way that, you know, I mean, this is the point, you know, which you saying that the police miss, is that it comes from below. Is that, you know, I mean, it doesn't, it's not a matter of some people reaching out down to local groups. It's local groups reaching out to each other.
Well,
you know,
the recent riots show you how quickly you can just generate an explosion of people. I mean, that's frightening. To me, that is really frightening. And it was done by someone who wasn't even in the UK, you know, and you just go, "Oof, that's scary. That is really scary." And I just go, but that's today, you know, and I don't know how you police that. I really don't. And, you know, but that is the modern equivalent of bringing people of creating a movement, almost an instantaneous movement. All right, they were all loosely connected to each other, but, well, they all had the same feeling of hate, I suppose. But I just think that was just a way where you could command that number of people within hours.
I mean, that was particularly. I mean, I don't want to get too much into this, but I mean that was a constituency of people who have been courted and shaped by mainstream media for quite a long time before even the likes of Tommy Robinson came along to direct them into action. You know, it's like they read the Daily Mail every day for the last 15 years, and
I'm not entirely convinced that's. I'm not sure all of them did actually. I'm sure it was just about there was an element of the timing, but I just feel that Tommy Robinson taps into this undertow of hate that
they were using a slogan which the government of the day was using as well, and the new government adopted themselves, to stop the boats. You know, I mean, there was something very mainstream about those riots. This wasn't like a small community that's like hidden away from society. There's something very mainstream about it, right?
Yeah, there was mainstream, but it was fueled by false information.
Yeah. False information from the mainstream media in a lot of cases.
Well, I know, but and then you go back and remember something like the anti-pollness movement that had much more solid base, you know, and organised by people who understood what people were really, you know, how people were really affected. And so you struggled with this idea that there is a movement coming and you're not across it. But that took a lot of time. I just the Tommy Robinson thing, I think, sadly, is a glimpse into the future of about. It doesn't take you long to build up an anti-sentiment to stuff. It doesn't take you long to manipulate people into believing something that's not true, you know. So all those who are in Dave Morris's situation, if you take a Dave Morris of 2024, has to counter the idea that I have to be believable, I have to have integrity, I have to be sincere. If we're going to organise this, we have, you know, everything I have to do has to be factual, true, and everything. People not bothered anymore. They just think, do I want to belong? Do I not?
I mean, it's quite interesting, isn't it, when we compare what London Greenpeace were doing in the 1980s, where so much of it's about creating these fact sheets, putting the facts down, getting information out. Whereas now we live in a time like this post-information age, where all the information is already out there. People who are mobilising don't need to drag that together.
They're too lazy to go and look for it. That's the problem. I mean, I can imagine that Dave and his colleagues worked bloody hard at putting everything together. They were unbelievably hard. You know, nowadays, it's, I mean, Tommy Robinson swimming in a swimming pool in Cyprus somewhere just simply flicks a switch and suddenly, whoosh. You know,
I would say that there are activists these days on our side, things like Corporate Watch, who do fantastic work. The Undercover Research Group do fantastic work. Kind of putting facts together, putting them out there. I mean, that still does exist. But like you say, the popularity.
Yeah, I know, and you still get protests, and the argument about who has the right to free speech and who doesn't carries on and on and on. Yes, I accept all that, but sometimes life is all about timing, and the poll tax thing was all about timing. But you forget that there's an enormous amount of hard work that goes into trying to get the momentum for people to say, I need to be there. I need to show, you know.
Yeah, absolutely.
I suspect there will be issues coming that may well do that again. But I haven't seen or sensed something on that scale for a long time.
I'm very aware we're short on time for our lunch, so I'm going to have to be back in fairly soon.
That'd be
But,
really good.
anything else you want to say about today's hearing?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I just think this tranche will end up being fascinating and very real to people who have probably not much interest in undercover policing and not much interest or memory in what happened 30 or 40 years ago. But there will be amazing stories about what individuals went through on the basis of subterfuge by the Met for reasons that I am still trying to get my head around. And they need a voice. I just hope more people can hear it. That's all.
Yeah, me too. Thanks for joining me. We're back again later on after lunch with Gabrielle Bosley, who was another member of London Greenpeace, who'll be giving evidence this afternoon. We're expecting to finish about 6 p.m. There is no live stream still, so I'll be giving... I've been told to be quiet by somebody for some reason. I don't know why they've done that. I'll be posting as it happens. It's the only way to follow it. Thanks for joining me. See you later.